life in general. So it was a very emotional experience for all of us. And anyways, I just have to thank these three people for their wonderful performances. And, you guys want to say anything?
You did.
Go ahead,
It's pretty hard, I think, partly as Don was saying, and then sitting through it, and you realize, especially beginning with Paul, who I'd become very close friends with, it was almost like a spiritual reality. Every time I'd show up in town, he'd show up. We just somehow knew where each other were. So sitting through this was very emotional. And then, well, then also following completion of the film, Cale, who had a lot to do with urging Don, I think, to get it done, and passing away. That was a very difficult thing for all of us because we were also very close to Cale. So that was difficult, but otherwise, reliving this whole thing, because it started our careers, I think, as Jane has said a number of times, that, you know, that book ended our careers in a way. At this point, at least, at this point, with their first feature film, and well, we hope it's not the book end. But it's been a great experience, and it was good to work with everybody again. That was a great thing about it, and coming back with Don, and, you know, and we had, of course, Penny, which was so good. And then working with Jane and some other wonderful, wonderful people that joined us, not only in the cast, but the crew. We had such wonderful crew working on this show. They wanted to be a part of this because of what it was, its iconic nature and what it meant to Canada. You know, people that came from distances and partly at their own expense. They wanted to be in this production, partly because of Don, I think, but because of the you know, the memory of this wonderful film.
I just want to say also as well, because they're not here, that Kathleen Robertson gave a really wonderful performance. And at this point, I don't think she's seen the film yet. Her parents saw the film Thursday night, but she hadn't seen it yet because she's been tied up in a big series she's doing in Los Angeles. And also Anthony Lemke, who plays the young lawyer, who came from Montreal on his own expense because he wanted to be in the film. And I think he's really absolutely charming, and everybody else was wonderful, but those two people who aren't here, we just wanted to mention them as well. And here's Jane, who's got lots to say.
Too much. On a lighter note, it is true that going down the road started our career. Well, we all thought we were going to be big fat movie stars after the reception we got. And that was back in 1970? Yeah, 1970. So I think it was just so much different going down the road again, because it was a union film, and you know how much crew there is on a union film. Well, with Going Down the Road, there was Don, Richard Leiterman, and Jim McCarthy, the sound man, and us. That was it. And I got paid a whopping $600, which I thought was pretty good. And I think Doug might have made a couple of grand, maybe. And we think Paul might have weaseled some. Well, Paul just kept weaseling whatever he could out of Don. Free drinks and free dinners and stuff. But to give credit to Don, the first one we had the luxury of time. I think we had about 3 months to make that. I mean, we weren't shooting for 3 months, but yeah. And do you mind me telling them how quickly you had to do this one? But for filmmakers will appreciate this. Don had to do this in 18 days. I find that amazing. Absolutely amazing. So I mean, to work with Don Chabib again has just been a great honor. When they told us that we actually were going to do it, we knew we were in great hands, because Chabib's just a great filmmaker. So thank you very much.
Does everyone, or does anyone have any questions for the director and cast?
When's the sequel?
Won't be another 40 years. And going back at the very beginning of my career, not quite the very beginning, there's a gentleman here tonight Bernie Gwindon, who came up to me, and I couldn't believe it. In 1965, I made a film called Satan's Choice, which was about, that's right, the bike gang that became the Angels. And there was Bernie, who was in the film.
There he is.
Yeah. And that was a great question. And it's so funny because just the year previously, I was talking to someone out in Oshawa at a car wrecking place about Bernie, and there he is. That was really nice.
We've all come back to haunt you.
Just curious as to what the budget was for the first film and approximately what the budget was for the second.
Good question.
Maybe $1.98 plus.
Well, the budget for the first one, well, there wasn't really any budget. I just had what I had to break it work. And I made the film, and actually making the film was $27,000, which doesn't sound like a lot of money today, because you can make a film for $1.50 today. But that was a very small amount of money. And actually, the film eventually cost $72,000 by the time I got all the rest of it finished. But in those days, the blow-up was $45,000. And now blow-ups are peanuts. But in 1970, because this wasn't even shot on negative film, it was shot on reverse. They didn't have 16mm negative in 1970. So blowing it up from reversal was extremely expensive. And it cost twice as much as what it cost to actually shoot the film. And this budget was around $2 million. And, but we did it union, and it was just really stretching it. I mean, I had 18 days, 19, we had an extra day of car stuff. Whereas when we shot the original, it was over a period of about 10 or 12 weeks. Not shooting every week, and sometimes only 2 days in a week, and sometimes 5 and 6 days in a row. But we had the luxury of time, and time is money, but time is far more important than money, making a film.
When did you decide to make this film, and what compelled you to do so?
Well, people have been bugging me for years to do a sequel, and I really didn't want to. I felt that people would be very cynical about me doing it, and it would, you know, and also it's just not the film, I think in many ways that people expect it to be. They expect it to be closer to the original, but as I said, you know, they were making a rough, handheld, crazy film when they were 25 is one thing. It doesn't suit the same people when they're 65 or 60. But it was, Paul Bradley had been bugging me for years to make the film because he wanted another job, you know. And Paul was every bit what people talk about in the film. He was a con man and a hustler, and would you loved him dearly, but you wanted to kill him, as Pete says. And Cale had been pressing me the last couple of years to do something, and then a producer, director, Gail Harvey, got together with Cale, and Gail said, well, if you want to take a crack at writing a script that you'd like, I'd take a shot at trying to produce it. So when there was somebody professional involved, I said, well, let me sit down for a week or so and see if I can come up with an outline of a script. And the outline came pretty quickly, and it just pieces fell into place in terms of how I wanted to tell the story, because of course I had to tell the story with one of the main characters not alive, you know, which is a difficult thing to do. So I had to keep Joey's spirit alive, but I found a way of doing that through the letters and how he had, and so it's really a film about redemption of Pete and of Joey. So that's how it came, and then once it became, once I got the outline, then it looked like it was going to fit into place pretty simply. Then it was, you know, several months writing the script, but once I got on the road, so to speak, then I got on the train and I kept running with it.
Thank you.
If I might say, I mean, and I think Don fully agrees that all that we're saying about Paul Bradley, he was really quite a brilliant man. He had an amazing talent. He had other difficulties, however, so he wasn't able to continue and really share with us all that he had. But one of the reasons all of us loved him so much, I think, is because he was so true. He was real. He was a very sensitive, and as I think, as Bets had said, he was a very, very sweet man, and we all miss him. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, my dear. Hi, my dear. It's Nola Bradley. Bradley's daughter.
Oh, my goodness.
How are you? Oh, my Lord. Oh, my God. These are all girls. Oh, my God. Thankful. I am Nola Bradley's daughter. Wow, they look like you. Wow, that's awesome. I wanted to do something. If you don't mind, especially for Doug. Doug, I didn't have any idea how this movie. Give her the mic. Give her the mic. I didn't really expect that. Well, we've all held one of these before, but right? Anyways, I didn't expect the movie to be exactly the way I had planned when if I ever could run into you, and you. But I have something for you, Doug, from my dad, and it's just ironic that it all turned out the same. But if you don't mind, Doug, I hope you don't mind, would you take this gift? That's Paul Bradley.
Oh my God.
He wanted to be in the ocean. Will you spread him? My mom from the movie. But I also have to really thank Mr. Donald Shabib for all that he did to get in touch with my sister and I for 3 weeks, and I just found out the other day, lightning, it was, we got to get a hold of Donald Shabib, and you called the same day. We had no clue about any of this. Yeah, yeah. You spread him in the ocean or do whatever you want, but he loves the ocean. Thank you.
Tell a story about Paul. Richard Leiterman and I made a film about Paul about a year or two after this film came out, the original film, and it was a documentary for a CBC program called Telescope. It was called Born Hustler, and it was about Paul. And in the film, there was a little scene with Paul and his 2 daughters at a playground, and they were 5 and 6 or 4 and 5, whatever. And Paul was not what you would call the best family man, but he was a great guy. And to give you the essence of Paul, there's a scene in that film where Paul had a gimmick where he would rent a limo for about 3 hours. And in 1970, the only people who rent limos was either the Prime Minister or Mick Jagger or somebody. I mean, now it's Joe the Butcher or anybody. So he would get dressed up in a suit and rent the limo for 3 hours, and he'd drive around the outskirts of Toronto on a work day about 7 in the morning. And he'd pull up to a bus stop where there was a pretty girl, roll down the window and say, "Hey darling, would you like a lift to work?" And of course she'd jump in this limo with some rich guy, he'd take her to work, get her phone number, then drive out to make another round, and after about 3 hours he'd have about 10 girls' phone numbers, and then a week later he'd show up on a date and with no limo, they go into TTC, and he'd say, the limo's in the garage. Well, it was a pretty brilliant idea about mean girls, but that was Paul.
Oh, there's one more question up there.